So we're not gonna be breaking any new ground by talking about the Donkey Kong Country games.
It's pretty well treaded territory by now. I mean, this was a series that was very well received back when they were released like 1 trillion years ago. They also happen to be some of the first games that I ever played, and I'm pretty fond of them. I mean, I'm not gonna lie and say shit like, I knew I'd love these games from the second I started my Super Nintendo. Though that intro was some pretty good shit. But both of the first Donkey Kong Countries have stuck with me for right about 20 years. They've obviously got something good going for them. I think that comes down to the fact that Donkey Kong Country and its sequel Diddy's Kong Quest, love the pun, both know where they came from, but where others would have been shackled by their namesake and the legacy that came with it, they are instead something unique and well crafted. Mostly. Here, let me explain. Probably the most striking thing about these games is their art direction. Rareware rendered everything in the Donkey Kong Country titles as 3D models. You know, the same soulless husks you see on their boxes and in the marketing material, before converting it to sprites usable by the SNES. And I mean everything. The characters, items, levels, foreground, background, bananas, and even the fucking numbers used to keep track of lives. All of it. Whether you liked it or not, you know, that's a whole other discussion. But if there's anything you can say about the aesthetics of these games, it's that there is nothing else that looks quite like it. And that's so cool. If I were to try to explain what it looks like, I'd say that these games look like you're peering into a world made of plastic. And I don't mean that in a derogatory way at all. It feels like an evolution of playing with toys. You know, one of those old playsets from the late 90s or Bionicles or some shit. You know, everybody likes that. I mean, or at least the idea or the concept. The characters were expressive and charming, outside of, like, Candy. She's gross. Donkey, Diddy, and Trixie were fun and emotive, each with their own quirks that made them unique. Donkey Kong's larger physique meant that he was slightly slower, but strong enough to beat tougher enemies in just one hit. Dixie's banana hair let her glide gracefully and nimbly through the air, and she was also a bit more floaty. And Diddy had a cool hat. The enemies were equally enjoyable, ranging from adorable to weird to intimidating to silly, all without straying too far from a Saturday morning aesthetic. Out of the two games, I definitely say that Diddy's Kong Quest has the upper hand in terms of its enemy designs. What with the whole running pirate theme? Like, remember that one guy who was like a haunted pirate shirt? I loved it, and it had so much more personality and finesse than like shady vultures and doofy gophers. Though I did like that too. Interestingly, all of these cartoony-ass characters were put against semi-realistic, if heavily stylized landscapes. Surprisingly, while this could have turned into a giant mess, and it did in a couple levels, everything was astonishingly cohesive, despite how fucking weird it got. Seriously, the world of the Donkey Kong Country games takes us through jungles and caves, to derelict mines and ancient ruins, to amusement parks and sprawling castles, to chilling forests, sputtering volcanoes, industrial factories, and a fucking Ewok village. And every one of them feels as unique as the last. And the music composed by David Wise just completed these levels, wrapping them neatly in infectious tunes that I still find myself on occasion humming out of nowhere. Out of the two games, Diddy's Kong Quest pretty obviously has the stronger soundtrack, but I mean, that's like choosing between a giant pile of treasure and a slightly larger giant pile of treasure. These games were some of Wise's first big projects on the Super Nintendo, and he took advantage of its superior audio hardware. No longer shackled by the limitations of the NES, he went crazy incorporating environmental or industrial sounds into his music, particularly in his use of percussion. All of it sounded great, and while I wouldn't go as far as to say that these choices make you feel like you're in the world of the game, they still enhance the atmosphere of each level, and that shit's slick. The standout tracks for the two games are without a doubt Aquatic Ambience and Sticker Brush Symphony. Both songs are nothing short of fucking magical, with haunting electronic harmonies layered atop one another and enchanting melodies that are just too easy to lose yourself in. In conclusion, David Wise is a glorious golden god. Though there aren't a huge amount of levels in either game, practically every single one serves a purpose, introducing a new concept that will almost assuredly be used in levels to come. Eventually, these ideas are mixed and matched, creating real challenges for the player to overcome without overwhelming them with a whole host of new things all at once. Then, when the final levels hit you, you're put through the gauntlet, a highlight reel of everything you've had to learn and deal with in the game so far. Now, what I just described isn't and shouldn't be exclusive to the Donkey Kong Country games. It's just good game design. But the Country titles handle it so exceptionally well. Unfortunately, the level design is also where these games make their few stumbles. The most glaring of these issues is that the collision detection on a few platforms is just a bit weird. They're smaller than what their sprite would lead you to believe. That wouldn't be so bad if it weren't for the enormity of bottomless pits in the titles, and the resulting instant deaths that go against all other challenges built into the games. The camera is also zoomed in quite a bit, making it difficult to see exactly what's coming up ahead of you. And in a couple levels, an enemy or two will appear at the last second and snatch victory away from you. In a game where every hit matters, this can be frustrating beyond words, especially when you're barreling through a level at full speed. These moments feel more like cruel jokes than lighthearted shenanigans. Combined, all of these issues caused me more deaths than my pride is willing to admit. Another glaring major issue with the titles is their boss battles. Well, Country 1 specifically has a major problem with its bosses, aka they're not great. They weren't super inventive, they weren't very difficult, and they succumbed to the classic Nintendo rinse and repeat method of defeat. Diddy's Kong Quest was a step in the right direction in this regard, but they more than often border on unfair in their difficulty. Another thing that could be seen as a drawback with these games is what they call their plot. The story was paper thin, and that's being fairly kind to it, but I'm not gonna necessarily cite that as a negative thing. It did everything it needed to do to frame the gameplay. I use the phrase Saturday morning to describe the feeling of early video games quite a bit, and I think that this is a perfect example of that. I mean, in the first game, K. Rool doesn't even steal a princess or a person. It's just fucking bananas. Literally. Yet DK takes it like it's the end of his world, which is funny. It's nothing but funny. See, you start playing these games because you want to. There's no great peril to overcome, no world-ending apocalypse that you must thwart. You're just getting gross cave bananas back. So you play and Donkey Kong goes on his adventure because you want to. It's simple, it's easy, it's clean, I love it. Then as you play, you grow attached to these characters naturally. Or, you know, at least I did. They grew on me. And here's the kicker, the linchpin. Most of the time, you don't even have a traditional timer or a life bar, and the only power-ups you get are the mostly awful animal buddies, and sometimes invincibility. No, for almost the entirety of the Donkey Kong games, it's just you and the Kongs. You get exactly one set of controls to master across your entire time playing, and on top of all of that, you get one-hit deaths, which can be absolutely punishing. You know that if you fuck up, someone's getting stuffed back into an uncomfortably small barrel. And man, nobody wants that to happen. In this way, you get better and better and better only because of your own urgency. And I think that's the most encouraging way to play a game. These games aren't perfect, and they do trip up every now and then, but Donkey Kong Country and Diddy's Kong Quest made me feel like I was the one in control. That I was the one playing, that I was the one fucking up, and I was the one defeating the enemies and saving those poor kidnapped cave bananas. And in my eyes, that is what a video game should be.